this.
Amen.
I'm sorry, sir, but in the Bible it's, I will speak as God tells me to speak.
Amen. That's
The
good.
reason why you're trying to bridle, you're trying to muzzle the ox, amen, that's not biblical. You understood that. Little cross-reference there, huh? You know, the reason why you don't want the preacher to preach is because you think he might preach against your sin.
Right.
That's why.
Right.
Verse 5, but all their works they do for to be seen of men. They make broad their phylacteries and enlarge the borders of their garments, and love the uppermost rooms of the feasts and the chief seats in the synagogues. You know, you guys ever seen in those churches where they have like these like special seats in the back of the stage? Those things make me feel so uncomfortable because I'm like, he's just a man.
Yeah.
He's just a man.
I think they are.
Verse 7, and greetings in the markets, and to be called of men, Rabbi, Rabbi. But be not ye called Rabbi, for one is your master, even Christ, and all ye are brethren. And call no man your father. There's a good Catholic verse for you right there. Upon this earth, for one is your Father which is in heaven. Right, Mr. Roman Catholic? Right? You're going to say God is your Father, right? And they'll say yes. Why don't you listen to what he says right here? Neither be ye called masters, for one is your master, even Christ, but he that is great among you shall be your servant. And whosoever shall exalt himself shall be abased, that shall humble himself shall be exalted. Verse 13, but woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees. Here we go. He's naming names. Scribes and Pharisees. He's talking to a multitude and his disciples. I know he's God. He knows who's in the multitude. But for that fact, he's open air preaching. That's what he's saying. But woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites.
Amen.
What? For ye shut up the kingdom of heaven against men. For ye neither go in yourselves, neither suffer ye them that are entering to go in. Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! He's kind of getting a little personal.
Amen. Amen.
I mean, hey, if you're just going to preach Romans Road, brother, that's okay. But when you're getting a little bit personal,
Yeah.
hmm?
It's the Lord talking.
You would tell that to Jesus? Would you tell that to Jesus? For ye devour widows. What? You devour widows' houses? Now you're prying. Now you're prying. You're referring to that thing that... Hey, we shouldn't even be talking about that. No, no, no. Jesus is like, you devour widows' houses. What do you mean? They were hanging out with the widows that were about to die and say, hey, why don't you just sign over your house to me, you know, after you die?
Yep.
Oh, don't worry about your kids. They'll be okay. Don't worry that you're supposed to leave a heritage, you know, for your kids. You know, just sign it over to me.
Yeah.
And it says, and for a pretense make long prayer that ye shall receive the greater damnation. Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For ye compass sea and land to make one proselyte, and when he's made, you make him twofold more the child of hell than yourselves.
Wow.
Now that is not a nice thing to say, Jesus.
Yeah.
You know, your mother didn't teach you to talk like that.
God did.
You're going to tell Jesus that?
Yeah.
Jesus is perfect. He's saying this, and he's without sin.
Amen.
Right.
You understand the Jesus
Amen.
you're dealing
Preach.
with now.
Amen.
He was a man.
Nice.
7 times in this chapter he says, woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites. You know, in Matthew 23:16 and 19, Jesus calls them blind guides and fools.
Amen.
Why would he say such a mean thing? Maybe because it was true.
Right.
How could he say that, right, and still be without sin? He
Right.
spoke the truth.
Right.
Wow! Am I your enemy because I tell you the truth?
Yeah.
John 8:44. Remember, Jesus said, you're of your father, the devil.
Right.
Matthew 16:12. Jesus warned his disciples, beware the leaven of the Pharisees and the Sadducees. What was it? Well, we just looked at a little bit of it there in Matthew 23 and verse 9. Call no man your father. The only reason he was saying that is because that's what they wanted to be called. Who's the context? What's the context of what he's talking about? The scribes and the Pharisees.
Mm-hmm.
Jesus is like, oh yeah, by the way, call no man your father. They want to be called father. Look over in Luke 20. See another characteristic of these men that like to be called father. Luke chapter 20 and verse 46. Now this is Jesus telling you to beware of something, okay?
Mm-hmm.
He says, beware, we're in Luke 20, verse 46. Beware, beware. Did you get that? Beware of the scribes which desire to walk in long robes. So what is Jesus saying? There's something demonically influenced about a man that wants to walk around in a long robe and be called father.
Right.
Wow.
Right.
So think about this. There's a bunch of tragedy that these men that like to be called father, that walk around in the long robes, have committed. They have devastated households. They have ruined children.
Mm-hmm.
But you understand, on that day of judgment, nobody's going to be able to stand before Jesus and say, you never told me. Yes, I did. I did tell you. I said, beware of those men. Don't call them father. Beware of those men that want to walk around in long robes. I told you to beware of them. And you chose to go against what I told you. And you sacrificed your kid to him, didn't you? But that was little Johnny. You did it to Johnny because you chose not to follow the Bible.
Yeah.
That's rough, man.
Amen. It's good.
Nobody's going to be able to wag their finger at God. You understand that?
Right.
He's warned you. He said, come out of her. Don't be part of that. But if you want to be part of that, you want to play the whore? you think you're going to play the whore like that? You think you're going to play both sides of the fence like that? Well, then the outcome is yours. Have to it. But one thing's true is nobody's going to wag their finger in God's face.
Right.
He told you. And I'm not about to preach on the same platform as these people. You understand that? Or people who support these people. And there's local preachers that are dogmatic. They're cutting edge. They tell the truth. But they'll preach on the same platform as these men. At Grace Fest. Locally.
Wow.
Oh yeah. I'll tell you guys when it's coming up. We always go preach and hand out tracts, try to get the Christians right. Yeah. He'll probably be there again. Then you'll see who it is. But Jesus, teaching about the Pharisees and false teachers, oh, we already saw about that. Okay. So Jesus even called them a child of hell, even with all their interdenominational evangelistic efforts that result in whole nations of deceived and worthless, lukewarm people who are Christian in name only. Jesus called them a child of hell. But how can they be a twofold child of hell? Okay? Now this is when a false church or false teacher goes to a people that already has a false religion. Okay? I know I kick the Roman Catholic Church a lot, but they're a great example. So, they're a false church going to a people with a false religion already. They come there and they say, hey, you know, we have a better church. and ours is the truth. And it's the oldest, that's what they'll say. And you should follow our way. And they're like, oh, wow. And man, I got a lot of things I'm going to have to change around here. I got my totem poles, and I got my, we drink blood over here, and then the Catholic guy says, oh, no. Okay, what we'll do, we'll just switch the totem pole for a statue, okay? And then instead of you just drinking the blood straight from the cow's neck, like how you don't just poke it and drink it, what we'll do is we'll put it in a gold chalice, and I'll hold a cracker over it, and I'll say that I'm turning it into Jesus' body and blood, and that way you can still drink your blood.
Yeah.
So what becomes of that person? Twofold more of a child of hell than that reprobate that came to him initially.
Wow.
It's times 2.
That's good.
It's times 2. So we looked at the demeanor of Jesus' teaching. Jesus teaching on salvation in the Old Testament. Jesus teaching about daily living. Jesus teaching about Pharisees and false teachers. That was fun. Jesus teaching about heaven and hell. It's a fact that Jesus Christ spoke more about hell than heaven. Jesus Christ said a lot of things, didn't he? I mean, we talked last week. I had a guy, professing Christian, tell me he believes in the New Testament but not the Old Testament. But Jesus Christ quoted the Old Testament. Amen. That validates it. Amen. I mean, you're not getting around that. Jesus spoke about eternal punishment at least 70 times in the gospel. Seems that he was preoccupied with a thought that people after this life could actually go to hell. So preoccupied with it that he would leave his throne in heaven to come here to make a way for mankind to go to heaven. He could have just let everyone go to hell. He spoke of it as it was a real place. He acted as if he really believed it.
Amen.
I heard a longtime churchgoer explain to me that he, when looking for a church, hated the hellfire and brimstone preachers.
Yeah.
That's what they'll say. Well, I like preaching, but not hellfire and brimstone preaching, they'll say. And, well, maybe you've said it a time or two. You think about back in the day. But all this proves is that this professing Christian that I'm referring to that told me this, who has worn out his pew at his church because he's been going so long to church, he would actually hate Jesus and his preaching if Jesus showed up in the church service. What do you mean? Jesus was the only one in the Bible to use the term hellfire.
Yeah.
The only one in the Bible. I hate that hellfire and brimstone preaching. Jesus talked about hell. He was the only one to say hellfire. That phrase comes from the very mouth of Jesus. You hate Jesus is what you're telling me. Well, what about brimstone? Look at Luke 17.
What verse is the hellfire?
Luke, I'm sorry?
Hellfire.
Oh, I'm sorry. If you want the verses on the hellfire, well, let's just look over there. Okay. All right. Okay. I get flying. Matthew 5:22. We're going to look at a verse on the hellfire. You guys are a bunch of Baptists here. You want to see the hellfire. Matthew 5:22. Line upon line, precept upon precept, here a little, there a little. Jesus was the only one in the Bible to use the words hellfire, Matthew 5:22. But I say unto you that whosoever is angry with his brother without a cause shall be in danger of the judgment, and whosoever shall say to his brother Raca shall be in danger of the council, but whosoever shall say thou fool shall be in danger of hellfire. Look at Matthew 18, verse 9. Hang it right. Matthew 18 and verse 9. Matthew 18 and verse 9. And if thine right eye offend thee, pluck it out and cast it from thee. It's better for thee to enter into life with one eye rather than having two eyes to be cast into hell fire.
Amen.
Straight from the mouth of Jesus. I hate that hellfire and brimstone preaching. Well, you wouldn't like Jesus too much. What about the brimstone? Let's go back to Luke 17. Luke chapter 17.